She paused, her chest rising and falling rapidly, the color high in her cheeks. Behind her, Narcissa sat motionless, her face still hidden in her hands. Snape smiled. Before I answer you, oh yes, Bellatrix, I am going to answer. You can carry my words back to the others who whisper behind my back, and carry false tales of my treachery to the Dark Lord. Before I answer you, I say, let me ask a question in turn. Do you really think that the Dark Lord has not asked me each and every one of those questions? And do you really think that, had I not been able to give satisfactory answers, I would be sitting here talking to you? She hesitated. I know he believes you, but you think he is mistaken? Or that I have somehow hoodwinked him? Fooled the Dark Lord, the greatest wizard, the most accomplished Legilimens the world has ever seen? Bellatrix said nothing, but looked, for the first time, a little discomfited. Snape did not press the point. He picked up his drink again, sipped it, and continued, You ask where I was when the Dark Lord fell. I was where he had ordered me to be, at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Because he wished me to spy upon Albus Dumbledore. You know, I presume, that it was on the Dark Lord's orders that I took up the post. She nodded almost imperceptibly and then opened her mouth, but Snape forestalled her. You ask why I did not attempt to find him when he vanished. For the same reason that Avery, Yaxley, the Carrows, Greyback, Lucius, he inclined his head slightly to Narcissa, and many others did not attempt to find him. I believed him finished. I am not proud of it, I was wrong, but there it is. If he had not forgiven we who lost faith at that time, he would have very few followers left. He'd have me, said Bellatrix passionately. I, who spent many years in Azkaban for him. Yes, indeed, most admirable, said Snape in a bored voice. A nurse. You weren't a lot of use to him in prison, but the gesture was undoubtedly fine. Gesture? She shrieked, in her fury she looked slightly mad. While I endured the Dementus, you remained at Hogwarts, conlaughably playing Dumbledore's pet. Not quite, said Snape calmly. He wouldn't give me the defense against the dark arts job, you know. Seemed to think it might, bring about a relapse. Tempt me into my old ways. This was your sacrifice for the Dark Lord, not to teach your favorite subject. She jeered. Why did you stay there all that time, Snape? Still spying on Dumbledore for a master you believed dead? Hardly, said Snape, although the Dark Lord is pleased that I never deserted my post. I had 16 years of information on Dumbledore to give him when he returned, a rather more useful welcome back present than endless reminiscences of how unpleasant Azkaban is. But you stayed. Yes, Bellatrix, I stayed, said Snape, betraying a hint of impatience for the first time. I had a comfortable job that I preferred to a stint in Azkaban. They were rounding up the Death Eaters, you know. Dumbledore's protection kept me out of jail, it was most convenient and I used it. I repeat. The Dark Lord does not complain that I stayed, so I do not see why you do. I think you next wanted to know, he pressed on, a little more loudly, for Bellatrix showed every sign of interrupting, why I stood between the Dark Lord and the Sorcerer's Stone. That is easily answered. He did not know whether he could trust me. He thought, like you, that I had turned from faithful Death Eater to Dumbledore's stooge. He was in a pitiable condition. Very weak, sharing the body of a mediocre wizard. He did not dare reveal himself to a former ally if that ally might turn him over to Dumbledore or the Ministry. I deeply regret that he did not trust me. He would have returned to power 3 years sooner. As it was, I saw only greedy and unworthy Quirrell attempting to steal the stone and, I admit, I did all I could to thwart him. Bellatrix's mouth twisted as though she had taken an unpleasant dose of medicine. But you didn't return when he came back, you didn't fly back to him at once when you felt the dark mark burn. Correct. I returned 2 hours later. I returned on Dumbledore's orders. On Dumbledore's. She began, in tones of outrage. Think, said Snape, impatient again. Think. By waiting 2 hours, just 2 hours, I ensured that I could remain at Hogwarts as a spy. By allowing Dumbledore to think that I was only returning to the Dark Lord's side. Because I was ordered to, I have been able to pass information on Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix ever since. Consider, Bellatrix. The dark mark had been growing stronger for months. I knew he must be about to return, all the Death Eaters knew. I had plenty of time to think about what I wanted to do, to plan my next move, to escape like Karkaroff. Didn't I? The Dark Lord's initial displeasure at my lateness vanished entirely. 1. Assure you, when I explained that one remained faithful, although Dumbledore thought I was his man. Yes, the Dark Lord thought that I had left him forever, but he was wrong. But what use have you been? Sneered Bellatrix. What useful information have we had from you? My information has been conveyed directly to the Dark Lord, said Snape. If he chooses not to share it with you, he shares everything with me, said Bellatrix, firing up at once. He calls me his most loyal, his most faithful. Does he? Said Snape, his voice delicately inflected to suggest his disbelief. Does he still, after the fiasco at the Ministry? That was not my fault, said Bellatrix, flushing. The Dark Lord has, in the past, entrusted me with his most precious, if Lucius hadn't. Don't you dare blame my husband, said Narcissa, in a low and deadly voice, looking up at her sister. There is no point apportioning blame, said Snape smoothly. What is done, is done. But not by you, said Bellatrix furiously. No, you were once again absent while the rest of us ran dangers, were you not, Snape? My orders were to remain behind, said Snape. Perhaps you disagree with the Dark Lord. Perhaps you think that Dumbledore would not have noticed if I had joined forces with the Death Eaters to fight the Order of the Phoenix. And, forgive me, you speak of dangers, you were facing 6 teenagers, were you not? They were joined, as you very well know, by half of the Order before long, snarled Bellatrix. And, while we are on the subject of the Order, you still claim you cannot reveal the whereabouts of their headquarters, don't you? I am not the secret keeper, I cannot speak the name of the place. You understand how the enchantment works, I think. The Dark Lord is satisfied with the information I have passed him on the order. It led, as perhaps you have guessed, to the recent capture and murder of Emmeline Vance, and it certainly helped dispose of Sirius Black, though I give you full credit for finishing him off. He inclined his head and toasted her. Her expression did not soften. You are avoiding my last question, Snape. Harry Potter. You could have killed him at any point in the past 5 years. You have not done it. Why? Have you discussed this matter with the Dark Lord? Asked Snape. Lately, I am asking you, Snape. If I had murdered Harry Potter, the Dark Lord could not have used his blood to regenerate, making him invincible. You claim you foresaw his use of the boy. She jeered. I do not claim it, I had no idea of his plans, I have already confessed that. I thought the Dark Lord dead. I am merely trying to explain why the Dark Lord is not sorry that Potter survived, at least until a year ago. But why did you keep him alive? Have you not understood me? It was only Dumbledore's protection that was keeping me out of Azkaban. Do you disagree that murdering his favorite student might have turned him against me? But there was more to it than that. I should remind you that when Potter first arrived at Hogwarts, there were still many stories circulating about him, rumors that he himself was a great dark wizard, which was how he had survived the Dark Lord's attack. Indeed, many of the Dark Lord's old followers thought Potter might be a standard around which we could all rally once more. I was curious, admit it, and not at all inclined to murder him the moment he set foot in the castle. Of course, it became apparent to me very quickly that he had no extraordinary talent at all. He has fought his way out of a number of tight corners by a simple combination of sheer luck and more talented friends. He is mediocre to the last degree, though as obnoxious and self-satisfied as was his father before him. I have done my utmost to have him thrown out of Hogwarts, where I believe he scarcely belongs, but kill him, or allow him to be killed in front of me. I would have been a fool to risk it with Dumbledore close at hand. And through all this we are supposed to believe Dumbledore has never suspected you? Asked Bellatrix. He has no idea of your true allegiance, he trusts you implicitly still. I have played my part well, said Snape. And you overlook Dumbledore's greatest weakness, he has to believe the best of people. I spun him a tale of deepest remorse when I joined his staff, fresh from my death eater days, and he embraced me with open arms, though, as I say, never allowing me nearer the dark arts than he could help. Dumbledore has been a great wizard, oh yes, he has, for Bellatrix had made a scathing noise. The Dark Lord acknowledges it. I am pleased to say, however, that Dumbledore is growing old. The duel with the Dark Lord last month shook him. He has since sustained a serious injury because his reactions are slower than they once were. But through all these years, he has never stopped trusting Severus Snape, and therein lies my great value to the Dark Lord.